Guys, let's talk about this. The Baseball Writers Association of America has made their annual choice, and for the ninth time in history, the second time in a decade, nobody has been selected by the Baseball Writers Association of America to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, obviously, in the last 10 years, the question of steroid era players, specifically those like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, being elected to the Hall of Fame has been a question that many baseball writers have said no to. And that's what we're going to talk about here. But more importantly, perhaps the bigger news of the week that superseded Bonds and Clemens being left off again, and again, they only have 1 year left of eligibility after this season, is Curt Schilling. Retired pitcher Curt Schilling was up for election this year, missed election by just about a dozen votes, and then requested publicly that he be taken off of the list for future consideration by the Baseball Writers Association of America for the Hall of Fame. He wants to wait until the Veterans Committee can vote for him because he believes they are the ones who actually know what they are talking about. Now, Michael, I'll start with you here. It's a very controversial thing to say, but is there any truth to what he's saying?
Well, first off, let me just say this about Curt Schilling. I don't like Curt Schilling. I don't agree with the word that he says. I don't want to hear from Curt Schilling. I just don't like the guy. All of that being said, and I disagree with everything that he says in terms of stuff outside of baseball, he should be in the Hall of Fame because here is the deal. This is not the Hall of, political opinions. This is not the Hall of best Twitter feed. This is the Hall of Fame for baseball. The simple fact of the matter is that Curt Schilling, if you look at the numbers, you look at the stats, you look at the accomplishments, is one of the greatest pitchers to ever play the game. From that fact alone, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Now, the other thing to look at is a lot of writers, and this is my larger problem, are taking their own personal opinion of him, assessment of him as a person, and impacting their assessment of him as a baseball player. And that is not, it just doesn't compute for me. The Baseball Hall of Fame is the most hypocritical organization. The Baseball Hall of Fame Writers Association is the most hypocritical organization in sports. They elected Ty Cobb to the Baseball Hall of Fame. He's a racist. He was associated with fixing a game once. He was investigated or something like that. You had a guy, and this is, I never really heard of this guy before either. But let me find here. Cap Anson, the man responsible for establishing baseball's color line in the 1880s. He's in the Hall of Fame. Commissioner Kenshaw Landis, who oversaw 3 decades of segregation in baseball. He's in the Hall of Fame. These are 3 terrible human beings that should not be recognized at any level. But if you're going to put them in the Baseball Hall of Fame because of the great things he did for baseball, then I don't know how you could keep Curt Schilling out. Because the simple fact of the matter is the Baseball Writers of America are hypocrites. They have a moving line. Some of them have admitted in interviews that they purposely did not vote for people first time around because they didn't like them or they didn't like how they weren't nice to them when they were reporters. I mean, it's a joke. The fact that what do the Baseball Writers of America know more than the fans? The fact that just because they covered the teams, they're the gatekeepers of baseball, that's ridiculous. They don't know any more than the fan that's been following the league for 30 years of their entire lives. In my opinion, the Baseball Hall of Fame should have an admission panel made up of former writers, former players, and people in the league, just like the NFL does. I think the NFL has a much better process. So I could talk about this for hours. We could do a whole Saturday one-on-one on what's wrong with the Baseball Hall of Fame. The simple fact of the matter is the Baseball Writers of America let in horrible people into the Baseball Hall of Fame, and now they've decided they've had a change of character, and it just doesn't make sense to me. You have to judge them on baseball, and when it comes to Curt Schilling, you want to let him in. And it's mind-boggling to me, the people that enter the Hall of Fame and aren't in the Hall of Fame and things they do agree with and don't agree with, they're just so hypocritical.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because when Curt Schilling wrote on Facebook that he did not want to be considered for next year anymore, the Baseball Writers Association said, we hope that you deny this request. Like that he has to be on. It violates our policies. It violates our protocols. But like, what's the point of putting him on again next year? Because after this, no one's going to vote for him again next year. Like, why would they suddenly let him in after he posted on Facebook that he didn't want them to vote him in and that he didn't care about their opinion? So I think for them to be like, it's a violation of our rules, it doesn't really matter, because even if they do it by the rules, they're probably not going to induct him anyways. So I feel like there are definitely some inconsistencies here in how the baseball writers decide who and who not deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
There are a lot of issues in this generation of baseball that need to be addressed, but the overburdening issue of all of this is that baseball is losing fans fervently to age, to lack of compatibility with a fan base of any type of youth. And part of the reason for that is the same kind of thing that we see with the Hall of Fame. There is a certain sense of gatekeeping with baseball. It is a traditionalist sport, which in some ways can be a good thing, but in a lot of other ways, it keeps people out. You're leaving people out of the fun, which is probably baseball's biggest fault of this age. And nowhere is that more clear than with the Baseball Writers Association of America, with these people who get to be in the clubhouse and get to have their opinions of players and get to talk to each other all throughout the season, all throughout their careers, being the only people who get a say in this generation, not even including the Veterans Committee here, to have a say in who baseball should enshrine is ridiculous. Of course, personal opinions are going to matter. And to me, the best example of that is, to me, the best baseball player ever, the best person to ever walk on a diamond is Willie Mays. I don't understand how that man did not receive 100% of the vote for the Hall of Fame in his first year. Yeah, he's the first ballot Hall of Famer. Why was he not the first unanimous Hall of Fame vote? That blows my mind. There you go. There it is right there. Personal opinion does matter here. And of course, like Mike was mentioning earlier, if you're going to enshrine anybody who had anything to do with the segregation of baseball in the 20th century in the Hall of Fame, then bloody socks put Curt Schilling into the Hall of Fame. That's what I say. And that idea of personal feelings and opinion never has it been more clear than the steroid era, because Barry Bonds was number one on the home run list, and will likely continue to be after all of the official Negro League statistics are finalized. Roger Clemens was a generational pitcher. And personally, I think if they had never touched steroids, they would still have been Hall of Fame players. Barry Bonds was a 30-30 season guy when he was a skinny player playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So let me ask you, I'll start with you again, Michael. Would you personally put Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens in the Hall of Fame? And again, reminder, next year is their last year of eligibility on this particular ballot.
Yeah, so first off, I would. And this there's a few reasons why. Number one, again, it just makes no sense. They inducted Bud Selig, one of the worst commissioners in baseball, into the Hall of Fame. The guy that oversaw the steroid era, the guy that let it happen and didn't implement testing until 2004. The guy who, depending on who you ask, and a lot of people in baseball around him as well, knew what was going on and let it happen because it was good for the revenue and everything else in terms of growing the sport's popularity again. If so, look, what Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens did was wrong. Steroids is morally wrong. Cheating is wrong. And that I understand that's an issue. But when you let it happen, when the league says that's okay, and then they only call them out once there's a public outcry from like the government, as we remember the Senate and the president around in the early 2000s called out baseball for the steroids, and that's when it became an issue. It doesn't compute. If you're going to let them do it, then you can't punish them retroactively. And the other thing is, like you said, Dylan, both of them were Hall of Famers before they even took steroids. If you believe the documentation as to when they started taking them, as well as the eye test to look at their physical, bodies. Look at Barry Bonds; his head grew 5 sizes after he apparently started taking steroids. You could tell by just looking at him. But to me, it's just a matter of the baseball let it happen, and you can't punish them now retroactively. And also, you cannot tell the story of baseball without Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds. These guys are ingrained in the fabric of the game. If you want to put an asterisk on the plaque that says, hey, these guys did steroids, that's fine, but they should be in the Hall of Fame. And also, Apparently now the writers care about performance enhancers. What about in the 70s and the 80s when all those great players were doing methamphetamines and cocaine to stay awake all the time and play all those games back to back? What about the fact that segregation was a performance enhancer? Do you think Ted Williams would be, have that career high batting average if he went up against the great like Satchel Paige and all those great African-American ball players that were kept out of Major League Baseball? Again, the hypocrisy is ridiculous, but to put it simply, Clemens and Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame.
I agree. I definitely think that they should be. It's very hypocritical. And I think this is especially interesting because next year, which will be like their 10th year, Alex Rodriguez comes up on the ballot. And he had that whole year-long suspension from drug use. So I think that there will be a lot of hypocrisy revealed if he gets more votes than Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens. And so I just think that they very much so, the baseball writers pick and choose who gets to be punished for the performance enhancers versus it just being a general rule that everyone is punished or a general rule that nobody is punished in the Hall of Fame. You just have to go one way or the other. And so I think that their inconsistencies have been revealed. But like Mike was saying, I believe Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens should be in the Hall of Fame because there are so many other people, other players who have committed worse atrocities and are in the Hall of Fame.
Caleb, personally, I think Alex Rodriguez is going to suffer an even worse percentage of votes, specifically in his first year around than Bonds and Clemens did. Because Bonds and Clemens, at least at this point in time, have the advantage of time having passed. The three of us talked about this before the show, but baseball writers love to reminisce more than anybody. And they love to put that golden aura around players of the past. Which is part of the issue with any validity to who is statistically in the Hall of Fame, beside personal opinions of players or segregation or steroid use or anything. So there is a lot wrong with the Baseball Hall of Fame. And we are seeing a lot of its hypocrisies right now. And you can tell that a lot of those hypocrisies are clear when many baseball fans who've hated him for a long time are agreeing with Curt Schilling.